A message was sent across the stars, but no one ever expected a reply. After centuries of silence, an ancient Earth ship, long thought lost in the void, reappears out of nowhere, its crew vanished, its technology beyond comprehension. What could have possibly happened to the lost Earth ship, and what strange, impossible power does it now carry? The legend of the lost Earth ship had been passed down through whispers and faded documents. It had been one of Earth's pioneering vessels, launched with hopes of exploring the farthest reaches of the galaxy. Its mission had seemed like a simple one, to chart new worlds and perhaps find allies among the stars. But something went terribly wrong. The ship vanished, swallowed by the darkness of space, and for generations it was assumed to be a lost cause, just another tale of ambition fading into the void. Yet the mysterious reappearance of the ship raised more questions than answers. Reports came in, sparse and fragmented, strange energy readings, impossible velocity, unexplained phenomena surrounding its arrival. The ship's return wasn't marked by the usual celebrations of success. No, this was different. It was as if the ship had brought back something unnatural. Technology that defied all known principles of science and answers to questions no one had dared to ask. The galaxy was about to learn that nothing in the universe was truly lost, and that humanity had a hand in something far bigger than they realized. But how did this ship survive for so long, and what secrets had it unlocked? To uncover the truth, we must first look into the origins of the ship itself and the very fabric of the journey that led it to this moment. Every great journey starts with a few brave explorers. Right now, HFY ApexChronicles is just beginning, and your support means everything. If you enjoy unraveling the mysteries of the universe, hit subscribe. It's free, and it helps us grow this community together. The Lost Earth ship wasn't just any ship. It was the Odyssey, a vessel built for one purpose: to explore the unknown. Launched in the early years of the 22nd century, it was part of humanity's first attempts to explore the far reaches of the galaxy. Designed with cutting-edge propulsion technology, it could travel faster than any ship before it, reaching distant stars and planets in search of resources, knowledge, and perhaps alien life. The crew of the Odyssey was a carefully selected team of scientists, engineers, and diplomats, each chosen for their expertise in their respective fields. They were humanity's brightest, their mission one that could alter the course of history. And yet, within 5 years of its launch, all contact with the ship was lost. Attempts to trace its last known coordinates proved fruitless, and as time passed, it faded from the collective memory of humanity. But the universe has a way of keeping its secrets, and sometimes it isn't ready for the truth to be revealed. The galaxy at large had its own plans. New empires rose, new alliances were forged, and civilizations expanded their territories. Yet humanity's Odyssey remained a ghost story. No one could have foreseen what was coming. The ship's reappearance, years after it should have been nothing more than a wreck floating aimlessly in the black, would shake the very foundations of what humanity thought was possible. What could have happened during those long years of silence? What force could have kept the Odyssey intact, and what had it discovered that made its return so significant? The answers weren't easily found, but every new report hinted at something mind-bending, something far beyond the human mind's grasp, an advanced form of technology that bent the rules of physics, time dilation, energy manipulation, and worse, an unknown power hidden deep within the ship's core. And then, there was the crew. The Odyssey was not just a ship lost to space. It was a vessel of mysteries. Its crew, too, had changed. But how? Had they been lost to the ages, or had they found something far beyond anything humanity could ever understand? The universe is vast, and every corner holds a secret. Humanity's return to the stars was never meant to be this, never meant to unravel something so impossible, so strange. But this was humanity's Odyssey, and they were about to learn that some things were never truly lost. The Odyssey's return didn't happen in the way anyone expected. It wasn't some dramatic crash landing or grand announcement over the galactic networks. No, the ship simply appeared, drifting quietly into the outer orbit of Earth's moon. No comms, no warning signals, no requests for aid. Just a silent, ghostly presence that would mark the beginning of humanity's next chapter in the stars. It wasn't until the deep space sensors caught a strange anomaly that anyone even noticed. The ship had returned with no crew on board, or so it seemed. Its exterior was perfectly intact, showing no signs of the wear and tear one would expect after such a long absence. But that's where the mystery deepened. Those who dared to board the Odyssey found a chilling emptiness inside. The air, though stale, was breathable. The controls, though aged, were functional, but there was no sign of life. Not a single crew member remained. At first, it was assumed that the crew had simply been lost, or worse, that they had perished somewhere in deep space. But as engineers began to sift through the ship's systems, they uncovered a series of strange readings, signals emanating from a part of the ship thought to be completely sealed off. This part, buried deep in the Odyssey's lower decks, was never part of the ship's original design. No one knew where it had come from. When the crew began to investigate, they found something that defied all known technology. In a hidden compartment deep within the ship's core, they found a device unlike anything humanity had ever conceived. It pulsed with an unnatural light, and its metal surface shimmered like liquid, constantly changing form as though it were alive. The readings coming from this device were like nothing the crew had ever seen. Energy readings spiking into the thousands of terajoules, and yet it was completely stable, defying every law of thermodynamics. This was the first clue, the first hint that something had radically changed within the Odyssey. Whatever had happened during its long disappearance had not only affected the ship's technology, but the very nature of the universe it had traveled through. The device was something more than just technology. It seemed to be a bridge between dimensions, a conduit for energy that shouldn't have existed. The question was no longer how the ship had survived, but what had it encountered. The only thing that seemed to make sense was that the Odyssey had stumbled upon something far beyond anything humanity had ever imagined. A galaxy-spanning civilization, one with technology so advanced that it made human achievements seem like primitive toys by comparison. And this technology, this strange, otherworldly device, had somehow attached itself to the ship. But the implications of such a discovery were staggering. What if humanity wasn't the first to unlock the secrets of the stars? What if the ship had found something ancient, something that had been lost to the ages? The more the scientists and engineers aboard the Odyssey tried to understand the device, the more they realized that the answers lay not in the ship's systems or records, but in the very fabric of the ship itself. The Odyssey had been transformed by something far greater than humanity could comprehend. While the device remained a tantalizing mystery, the real breakthrough came when they finally cracked open the data logs. There, buried in cryptic entries and complex codes, was a record of events that would send shockwaves through the galaxy. It became clear that the Odyssey had traveled to places no human ship had ever gone, passing through strange regions of space, encountering otherworldly forces, and, most importantly, surviving against all odds. In one of the logs, a cryptic entry stood out, written in a language that no human could recognize at first. The entry was brief, but it spoke of something terrible, something that had been waiting for the crew of the Odyssey, a force older than time itself, one that had been dormant for eons, but had been awakened by the ship's presence. This force, it seemed, was what had kept the ship intact, keeping it alive through the ravages of space and time. And then, the crew's final entry made it clear. The ship had become a beacon, not just a survivor of cosmic storms or battles, but something that radiated with power, a power that could rewrite the very laws of physics. So, what happened to the crew? No one knew for certain. The logs ended abruptly, and whatever force had taken over the Odyssey seemed to have claimed them too. It was clear that the crew had encountered something that was beyond them, something that wasn't entirely human. They were no longer just explorers. They were part of the Odyssey's transformation. But that wasn't the only mystery. There was something about the ship's return that didn't sit right with the people of Earth. The Odyssey's sudden reappearance wasn't a random event. It wasn't a mere fluke of space and time. It was as if the ship was calling to Earth, as if it had a purpose in returning. And as the galaxy watched, humanity found itself caught in the middle of a game it didn't even know was being played. A game between ancient powers, one where the stakes were higher than anyone could imagine. The Odyssey was no longer just a ship. It was a symbol of something far larger, something far more dangerous. And it was just the beginning. Would humanity be ready for what came next? Or would they be swept away in the storm that was about to follow? No one knew for sure. But the questions had only just begun, and the galaxy was holding its breath. As the Odyssey's mysteries began to unfold, humanity found itself caught in a web of intrigue and danger, with the galaxy's powers watching closely from the shadows. The ship's return was no accident. It was a catalyst, a sudden, unexpected event that would forever alter the balance of power, as ancient alien factions began to stir, recognizing the ship as a key to something far more significant than Earth could yet comprehend. At the heart of the ship's enigmatic return was the Defies, the artifact that had seemingly merged with the Odyssey itself. Scientists back on Earth struggled to make sense of it. The Defies defied all known laws of physics, generating energy far beyond anything humanity had ever seen. But the real shock came when deep scans revealed something even more terrifying. The Defies was alive. It wasn't just a piece of technology. It was an entity. Or at least it was something that had been fused with the ship's systems, altering its very nature. This was no ordinary alien artifact. It wasn't just a tool or weapon. It was a conduit, a vessel of immense power, capable of manipulating space, time, and energy in ways that shattered the foundations of everything humanity had learned. The scientists who worked on unlocking its secrets began to realize that the Odyssey had been transformed during its long journey through the galaxy. It wasn't just a ship anymore. It had become something else entirely, something that held the key to unimaginable power. And now, it was calling to the universe. The first sign that the Odyssey wasn't just an ancient relic came when ships from other galactic powers began to approach Earth. These weren't ships from neighboring systems, nor were they local traders or explorers. They were warships, mighty fleets sent by forces that had their eyes on the ship's power. These factions had been watching for centuries, waiting for the return of the Odyssey, knowing that whoever controlled it would have access to unimaginable power. And the first wave of ships was just the beginning. Among the factions that sought the Odyssey, there were some that were willing to do anything to claim it, no matter the cost. One such faction was the Gilari, a cold, calculating species that had long dominated a vast portion of the galaxy. They were not interested in alliances, nor did they care for diplomacy. They had one goal: power. Their ships, sleek and deadly, approached Earth with a singular focus: the Odyssey. What made the Gilari so dangerous wasn't just their overwhelming numbers or their advanced weapons. It was their cunning. They knew that the device aboard the Odyssey wasn't just about energy. It was about control. Whoever mastered it could alter the very fabric of the universe, bend time and space to their will. For them, the return of the Odyssey was a sign. The time had come to assert their dominance once and for all. But the Gilari were not the only ones interested in the Odyssey. Across the galaxy, other powers began to move. Some came seeking knowledge, others hoping to form alliances with Earth to share the spoils of this new power. But there was one faction, an ancient empire, older than any civilization known to humanity, that had been waiting for this moment. Their ships, unlike anything seen before, arrived with terrifying precision. Their goal wasn't to claim the ship for themselves. It was to destroy it. The Aurelian Empire had been watching from the shadows for centuries, their agents embedded within countless systems. They knew what the Odyssey represented. The power it wielded could threaten their long-standing reign over the galaxy. They could not afford to let the ship's technology fall into the hands of any other species, especially humanity, whom they had long underestimated. Their fleets, vast and unyielding, descended upon Earth with the fury of 1,000 suns. As tensions between these factions escalated, Earth found itself caught in the middle, with the Odyssey as the focal point of a galactic conflict unlike anything humanity had ever imagined. The stakes were higher than they'd ever been before. This wasn't just a war for territory or resources. It was a war for control of the most advanced technology in the universe. And at the center of it all was a human ship, a relic from Earth's past, now carrying within it the potential to reshape the entire galaxy. But Earth wasn't defenseless. In the years since the Odyssey vanished, humanity had grown. It had developed its own fleets, built alliances with distant alien species, and created its own share of powerful technologies. The Odyssey wasn't just a ship, it was a rallying point for Earth's defense, and humanity was not about to let any galactic empire claim it without a fight. The first clash came swiftly. As the Gilari and Aurelian fleets neared Earth, their ships locked into battle with Earth's newly formed fleets, composed of human warships, allies from other systems, and even rebel forces who saw the fight for the Odyssey as a chance to strike back at the oppressive empires. The space around Earth became a battlefield, with thousands of ships exchanging fire, each side fighting for control of the most coveted prize in the galaxy. But the Odyssey, the ship that had once been nothing more than a symbol of Earth's ambition, now held the ultimate weapon in this war: knowledge. The ancient device at its core, with its ability to manipulate energy and reality itself, had been activated, but not yet fully understood. As each faction fought for dominance, it became clear that this was no ordinary ship. The Odyssey's powers were growing, and no one truly knew how to control them. In the midst of the chaos, the ship's internal systems began to resonate with the energy of the artifact. It pulsed with life, an ancient force awakening, not just from the ship itself, but from the varied fabric of space-time. The fabric of the universe itself seemed to bend around the Odyssey, as if it had become a nexus, a center point where the laws of physics were no longer relevant. And with that realization came a terrifying truth. The ship had not just returned, it had evolved. It had transcended its original form, taking on new abilities that were beyond anything anyone had imagined. Time itself seemed to warp in the presence of the Odyssey. Ships that ventured too close to its core found themselves disoriented, caught in a warping of space that defied all logic. The universe had changed, and humanity was at the center of it. The galactic powers, now fully aware of the Odyssey's true capabilities, entered a frantic race to either control or destroy it. The once clear division between alliances and enemies blurred as factions that had never cooperated before suddenly found themselves forming uneasy pacts, realizing that the Odyssey was not simply a piece of technology. It was a doorway to unimaginable power, one that could alter the fabric of the galaxy itself. The Gilari, relentless and methodical, saw the Odyssey as their birthright. Their empire had spanned centuries, and their warships, sleek and unyielding, were unlike anything humanity had ever faced. But now, they were fighting something beyond their comprehension. The Odyssey wasn't merely a ship, it was a living entity, and its technology was alive, constantly evolving, reacting to the presence of those who sought it. It adapted and grew stronger in the face of conflict, as if feeding on the very chaos of the war around it. The Gilari began to understand that their usual tactics, overwhelming firepower and meticulous strategy, were no longer enough. They had never encountered a foe like this. The Aurelian Empire, ancient and proud, with their godlike control over vast swaths of the galaxy, had long believed themselves invincible. Their technology, based on centuries of innovation and domination, was unrivaled. Until now, the arrival of the Odyssey shattered their perception of control. The Aurelian fleets, massive and intimidating, had been designed for subjugation, not for the unknown. And this was something beyond their reckoning. Their tactics, based on unyielding might, faltered in the face of the Odyssey's shifting nature. Their ships struggled to maintain their coherence as space itself twisted and bent around the powerful energy emanating from the human ship. And then there was Earth. Humanity, once a fledgling species on the fringes of the galaxy, now stood at the epicenter of a battle for supremacy. Earth had come a long way in its short time among the stars. The Odyssey was not the only technological marvel in its arsenal. Humans had learned, adapted, and innovated in ways that had astonished even the most advanced species in the galaxy. The fleets that Earth had assembled to defend itself were a testament to humanity's resilience. These ships were not just military vessels. They were symbols of Earth's survival, of its desire to protect its people and its future. However, despite their technological advancements, Earth's military might was still dwarfed by the might of the Aurelian and Gilari fleets. The key to winning this war was no longer sheer firepower. Earth had to play a new game, a game of strategy, a game of understanding the Odyssey and its power. Back on Earth, humanity's brightest minds, from military strategists to scientists, were in a race against time. The artifact, now recognized as a source of reality-bending energy, was still a mystery. It had fused with the Odyssey, altering its very core, its systems, and its purpose. But no one fully understood how it worked. Some theorized it was a remnant of a long-dead civilization, perhaps the creators of the ship itself, while others believed it was an alien intelligence, a being capable of manipulating the laws of physics in ways that should not be possible. As Earth's leaders scrambled to gain control over the situation, the true nature of the Odyssey began to reveal itself. The ship, which had once been a simple vessel for exploration, was now capable of manipulating time itself. It was like a tether between realities, where the laws of cause and effect could be bent or broken. But it wasn't just about power, it was about survival. The Odyssey was evolving at an exponential rate. The more it interacted with alien technology, the more it seemed to absorb their knowledge, their energy, and their secrets. The first major revelation came when a Gilari dreadnought, in pursuit of the Odyssey, ventured too close to the ship's core. The ship's defensive mechanisms triggered, only they weren't what anyone had expected. Instead of firing missiles or activating energy shields, the Odyssey's systems seemed to create a rift in space itself. The Gilari ship, caught in this rift, vanished, disappearing into what could only be described as a black hole, a tear in the fabric of reality. The event sent shockwaves through the galaxy. Both the Gilari and Aurelian fleets watched in stunned silence as their ships suddenly found themselves vulnerable in ways they could not explain. The Odyssey was no longer just a ship. It was a force of nature, and its power was beyond anything any of the galactic factions had anticipated. On Earth, the realization began to set in. The Odyssey was more than just a tool. It was a weapon capable of reshaping the galaxy, of rendering every existing power structure obsolete. But who controlled the ship would decide the future of all species. The choice was clear. Earth could either succumb to the overwhelming forces of the Aurelian and Gilari empires, or take a stand, seizing control of the Odyssey and the knowledge within it. As Earth's fleets mobilized to prepare for the coming battle, the Odyssey itself seemed to react. Its power, once dormant, began to pulse with a new intensity. A signal was sent across the galaxy, a pulse of energy so powerful that it was felt by every major galactic faction. This pulse was not just a message, it was a warning, a declaration of Earth's newfound strength, of its will to survive, and of the power it now held in its hands. The first strike came as Earth's fleets engaged the Gilari warships. What followed was nothing short of a miracle. The Odyssey, working in tandem with Earth's new technology, manipulated space around the battle. Ships found themselves shifting positions without warning, caught in gravity wells that shouldn't have existed. Time itself seemed to slow down, warp, and twist. The Gilari, once so sure of their technological superiority, found themselves caught in a reality they couldn't control. The battle became a test of willpower and adaptation, as both sides struggled to keep up with the unpredictable forces at play. But the Galari weren't the only ones caught off guard. The Aurelian fleet, still reeling from the shockwave caused by the Odyssey's newfound powers, now faced a growing threat they hadn't anticipated: humanity's resilience. Earth's ships, though not as advanced as the Aurelians, fought with an ingenuity that defied logic. They adapted, they adjusted, and they fought smarter. It wasn't just about technology, it was about human spirit. And that made all the difference. The war for the Odyssey had begun, and humanity's future was now inextricably linked to the fate of the ship. Whoever controlled it would control the galaxy. Whoever failed would be left in the wake of history, forgotten. The battle for the Odyssey was like nothing the galaxy had ever witnessed. Space, vast and seemingly immutable, had become a war zone of unimaginable proportions. The Aurelian and Galari fleets, usually so controlled and calculating in their tactics, now found themselves at a loss. Each strategy they had meticulously honed for centuries fell apart in the face of the Odyssey's unpredictable power. Ships that were once symbols of their empires might now drifted helplessly, victims of an enemy that defied all logic and reason. The Galari, known for their brutal efficiency and overwhelming firepower, were perhaps the first to understand just how far they had underestimated the human race. The Odyssey, with its ability to bend reality itself, had rendered their weaponry useless. The intricate designs of their ships, meant to resist any form of energy attack, found themselves unable to defend against the gravitational anomalies and temporal shifts the ship generated. Entire fleets were scattered across vast regions of space in an instant, each ship fighting to regain its bearings in the fractured space-time field. The Aurelian Empire, on the other hand, was slower to adapt. Their arrogance, built on millennia of unchallenged dominance, had clouded their judgment. The Aurelians' focus on raw, overwhelming might, the sheer size of their fleets, and their advanced, energy-based weapons, had worked against them. The Odyssey wasn't something that could be measured in firepower alone. It wasn't a question of having bigger ships or more energy reserves. It was about how the Odyssey manipulated the very foundation of space. Time bent. Gravity shifted. The rules of combat no longer applied. And that was exactly what the humans had hoped for. The Odyssey was humanity's response to a galaxy that had once seen them as insignificant. Its technology, while still shrouded in mystery, was not just a tool for destruction. It was a means of survival. Earth had always been the underdog, the last to the table when it came to galactic influence. But no more. The Odyssey was not just a ship. It was the embodiment of everything humanity had fought for, a symbol of its resilience, ingenuity, and determination. The ship was a declaration of Earth's right to exist in this vast, uncaring galaxy, and the galaxy was beginning to take notice. As Earth's fleets, now bolstered by the mysterious powers of the Odyssey, engaged in their first full-scale battle against the Aurelian and Galari, the galaxy watched in awe and disbelief. The Odyssey's capabilities were beyond anything that had ever been seen. On the battlefield, time itself seemed to ripple. Ships would engage in full combat only to find themselves blinking out of existence, displaced to another point in space or time. Entire formations of enemies found themselves split in two, their fleets scattered as though they were little more than particles in the wind. But it wasn't just the ship's power that had humanity's enemies reeling. It was the people aboard it. The crew of the Odyssey was not just a collection of the finest soldiers and engineers. It was a blend of humanity's best and brightest minds, united by a single cause: survival. The humans who manned the ship understood the stakes. They knew the Odyssey was more than just a weapon. It was their home, their lifeline. They fought not for glory or power, but for their families, their planet, and the future of humankind. Their resolve was unshakable. As the first phase of the conflict unfolded, one thing became painfully clear to the Aurelian and Galari empires: Earth was not going to back down. The human fleets, though outnumbered and outgunned, fought with a fierceness that defied their odds. The Odyssey was at the heart of this resistance, but it wasn't the ship alone that was driving humanity's victory. It was the human spirit. In battle after battle, the humans showed their adaptability. The Odyssey was not a one-size-fits-all solution. It required innovation, resourcefulness, and quick thinking, qualities humanity had in abundance. The Gilari made the first major mistake by attempting a frontal assault on the Odyssey. The decision was based on a military doctrine that had served them well for millennia: overwhelming force and a swift, decisive blow. But they had failed to account for the Odyssey's ability to manipulate space and time. As they advanced, their lead dreadnought entered the range of the ship, only to have its weapons systems suddenly stop working. The Odyssey had activated a localized time field, slowing the dreadnought's movement to a crawl, making it an easy target for a concentrated strike. In moments, the dreadnought's hull was breached, its advanced weapons useless. It was the first major victory for Earth in this galactic struggle, but it was only the beginning. The Aurelians' response was swift and violent. They deployed their most powerful ships, massive, towering constructs of metal and energy designed to absorb and reflect nearly any attack. But even they couldn't withstand the power of the Odyssey for long. The ship's energy output was escalating, and it was no longer just about military tactics. The Odyssey began to create rifts in the fabric of reality itself. Massive interstellar distances were covered in moments. Enemy fleets that had been dispersed in one location found themselves unable to regroup because the Odyssey had folded space in such a way that their ships were scattered in different dimensions. It was as though the ship was playing a game with them, one that had no rules and no mercy. The key to the Odyssey's power was still a mystery. Some theorized it was an ancient weapon designed to end wars, to prevent conflict by rendering any form of conventional warfare meaningless. Others believed it was a piece of a much larger puzzle, an artifact created by an unknown race, with a far greater understanding of the universe than any modern civilization could fathom. What was clear, however, was that the Odyssey was not just a weapon. It was a key to the future, a future where humanity could stand as an equal or even a superior force in the galaxy. The war for control of the Odyssey had begun in earnest, and humanity was no longer on the defensive. It had become an active participant in the battle for galactic dominance. The Gilari and Aurelian empires, once invincible, now found themselves fighting for survival against a species they had long underestimated. As the Odyssey continued to evolve, humanity's resolve hardened. The people of Earth no longer saw themselves as the underdogs. They were the champions of their own fate. The stakes had never been higher, and with every battle, with every victory, they were proving that they belonged among the stars. The Odyssey had become a symbol of Earth's defiance, but the true extent of its power remained a mystery to both its allies and its enemies. Every time it revealed a new facet of its capabilities, it stunned the galaxy. Yet behind its apparent indestructibility, humanity was grappling with an unsettling truth. The ship was not merely a weapon. It was an artifact, one that seemed to have an intelligence of its own, as if it was guiding its crew towards a destiny beyond anything they could have imagined. Despite their growing victories, the human forces aboard the Odyssey were not blind to the looming dangers. The Aurelian and Gilari fleets, after suffering countless humiliations, began to change their tactics. They no longer underestimated the humans. The war had escalated, and now both empires sought to unlock the secrets of the Odyssey for themselves. If they could harness its powers, the balance of the galaxy would shift irrevocably. Earth's brief reign as the underdog would be over, replaced by a fight for control of a technology far beyond anything the galaxy had ever seen. In the heart of the Odyssey, Captain Jonathan Hayes stood before the enormous window that stretched across the command deck. Beyond it, the stars shimmered like diamonds in the vast, dark ocean of space. The battles had taken their toll, both on the crew and on the ship itself. Yet the Odyssey had become more than just a vessel. It had become a living entity, a reflection of the crew's will to survive. There were moments when Hayes swore that the ship was aware of their thoughts, responding to their needs before they even spoke them. But it wasn't the ship's strange behaviors that weighed heavily on Hayes' mind now. The true threat was the Odyssey's power and how it was shifting the dynamics of the war. Each use of its advanced technologies came with a price, a cost no one yet fully understood. The temporal shifts, the gravity anomalies, the bending of space, they were all connected to something ancient, something far older than the ship itself. The crew had only scratched the surface of what the Odyssey could do, and every time they pushed it further, they risked triggering something far more dangerous than they were prepared for. Hayes' eyes narrowed as he gazed out at the latest coordinates on the command console. The Aurelian and Galari had gathered their forces, realizing that they needed to end the war quickly before humanity could solidify its dominance. Their strategy had changed from one of direct combat to one of secrecy and subterfuge. They were no longer focusing on defeating the Odyssey in a traditional sense. They were now hunting the ship itself. If they could capture it or destroy it, Earth's last hope would vanish in an instant. A small message flashed on Hayes' screen. Incoming transmission. Priority Alpha. He instantly knew it was from Admiral Charlotte Dias, his most trusted ally and the strategic mind behind Earth's fleet. Her face appeared on the screen, her expression grim. "We've detected something," Dias said, her voice low but filled with urgency. "A massive fleet is approaching. It's not the Aurelian or Galari fleets. They're too scattered. This is something else, something new, and it's headed straight for us." Hayes' pulse quickened. Earth had fought long and hard to get this far. Now, just as they had begun to gain ground, an unknown force emerged from the darkness. "What are we looking at?" Hayes asked, trying to mask his growing concern. Dias hesitated, glancing at her own command console before speaking again. "We don't know yet, Captain. But whatever it is, it's unlike anything we've ever seen before. They're using an energy signature we've never encountered. It's not Aurelian. It's not Galari. It's different." "Different," Hayes repeated. "In what way?" Dias's face twisted with frustration. "I don't know, but I'm sending you the coordinates now. We need to move, immediately." With a nod, Hayes cut the transmission, his mind already racing through the possibilities. Who could this new enemy be? And why had they waited until now to reveal themselves? The Odyssey's engines hummed to life as the ship shifted course toward the incoming threat. In the vastness of space, every second felt like an eternity. The crew was tense, aware that something monumental was about to unfold. The bridge officers moved in a synchronized fashion, their eyes focused on the readings as they continued to gather information. The unknown fleet was drawing closer, but it was still too far out for accurate scans. And yet, the sense of dread permeating the air grew with every passing moment. As the hours ticked by, the vast shape of the approaching fleet began to materialize. The ships were unlike any the crew had ever encountered. Their designs were sleek, almost organic in appearance, with surfaces that seemed to ripple with an energy that defied the laws of physics. There was no visible weaponry, no shields, nothing that could be easily identified as a conventional battle fleet. These ships had a living, breathing quality to them, as if they were an extension of something far greater. "This isn't a fleet," said Lieutenant Kara Whitfield, the ship's chief engineer, her voice tinged with awe and fear. "It's a singular entity, a collective." Hayes' eyes narrowed as he leaned forward. "A collective? What do you mean?" Whitfield tapped a few commands on her console, and the main view screen shifted to show a close-up of the incoming ships. The edges of their forms seemed to shimmer as though they were constantly in flux, as if reality itself could not fully grasp their presence. There was no mistaking it now. These ships were alive, a part of something far beyond anything humanity had ever encountered. "They're not just ships," Whitfield said, her voice barely above a whisper. "They're part of a living organism. A hive." A wave of realization washed over the crew. This was no ordinary enemy. They were not dealing with a race or civilization. They were facing an alien life form, one that operated as a single, unified consciousness. "Is it hostile?" Hayes asked, already knowing the answer. "We don't know," Whitfield replied. "But they're heading straight for us. And I don't think they're here to talk." As the Odyssey drew closer to the enigmatic fleet, the crew braced for what was sure to be their most challenging battle yet. It wasn't just about defeating another empire. It was about understanding the very nature of their enemies. What did this collective want? And how could humanity hope to survive against an entity that was beyond their comprehension? The ship's weapon systems were primed, ready for the next phase of the war. But Hayes knew that this wasn't going to be a battle of firepower. This was something else entirely, a confrontation with the unknown, with a force that threatened to unravel everything Earth had worked so hard to achieve. The galaxy, it seemed, had one more mystery to offer, and humanity's survival was about to be tested in ways no one had anticipated. The air in the command center of the Odyssey was thick with tension as the crew watched the strange fleet approach. Their ships, alive and pulsing with an energy that seemed to defy every known law of physics, had closed the distance quickly. The unknown enemy was now within firing range, yet no weapons had been raised. The crew couldn't help but feel as if they were on the verge of facing an entity that existed outside of their understanding, an intelligence far older, far more complex than anything they had ever known. Captain Hayes stood at the center of the bridge, his mind racing. They had faced countless enemies before, from the Aurelian Empire to the Gilari warriors. But this was something else. It wasn't just a war for survival anymore. It was a battle for the future of the galaxy itself. This collective, this living fleet, was not just a threat. It was an enigma. "Are we picking up anything on comms?" Hayes asked, his voice steady but his eyes betraying his concern. Lieutenant Whitfield, the ship's chief engineer, glanced at the readings on her console, her face etched with confusion. "Nothing, Captain. They're not transmitting any signals. It's like they're waiting." A silence fell over the bridge. The unknown ships, their edges rippling and shifting as though made of fluid rather than metal, hung in the void of space. No weapons were aimed. No threats had been issued. And yet, everyone on board knew that this encounter would not end in peace. "We can't just wait here," Lieutenant Whitfield said after a long pause, her voice filled with uncertainty. "If they're waiting for something, then maybe we should." The entire ship shook violently, the lights flickering as a sudden burst of energy from the approaching fleet washed over the Odyssey. It wasn't an attack in the traditional sense, but rather a wave of force, a pressure that rattled every system on the ship. The crew struggled to stay on their feet, their hands gripping consoles and railings to avoid being thrown off balance. Hayes' heart raced as he looked around the bridge, his crew trying to regain control of the chaos unfolding around them. "Report," he barked, his voice sharp. Lieutenant Kara Whitfield was the first to respond, her fingers flying across the console. "We've lost power to some of the outer systems, Captain. The energy wave shorted out the communications array and disabled several of the shields. We're not in control of everything right now." Hayes clenched his jaw, his thoughts racing. This was no ordinary weapon. It was a kind of energy, an influence, far more sophisticated than anything humanity had ever encountered. It was clear now that the enemy wasn't interested in conventional tactics. They were probing the Odyssey, testing its defenses and capabilities, seeing how far they could push before something gave. "Get those systems back online," Hayes ordered, his voice unyielding. As the crew scrambled to restore functionality, another voice cut through the tension. It was Dr. Elise Marcus, the ship's lead scientist, and a woman who had spent months studying the Odyssey and its impossible technologies. "Captain, I think I understand what's happening," she said, her voice calm despite the chaos. "These ships, they're not using conventional weapons or technology. They're manipulating the fundamental forces of the universe around us. Gravity, energy, and space-time itself. What we're experiencing is not an attack, but a kind of communication, or a test. A chill ran down Hayes' spine as he turned to face her. A test. What kind of test? Dr. Marcus' face tightened with the weight of her words. I think they're trying to communicate with us on a level we can't yet comprehend. Their energy wave, it wasn't a strike. It was a resonance, a way of tuning into us. They're trying to determine if we're compatible, if we're worthy. Worthy, Hayes repeated, almost incredulous. Worthy of what? I don't know, Marcus replied. But if they see us as compatible, they might be offering something. Something that could change everything. The idea of being judged by an alien collective was both terrifying and awe-inspiring. Humanity had never considered the possibility that their survival would hinge not on defeating an enemy, but on proving their worthiness to exist in the galaxy alongside such ancient, mysterious beings. Hayes turned his attention back to the view screen, where the strange ships hovered motionlessly, their shimmering, living forms pulsating with an energy that seemed to call to the Odyssey. It was as if the ship itself was responding, drawing them closer. Every part of him screamed that they had to defend themselves, but the logic of the situation, the unsettling truth that they were being tested, held him back. We don't have time to figure this out, Hayes said, his voice steady despite the urgency in his chest. Prepare the ship for full combat. We'll need to show them that we're capable of defending ourselves, regardless of what they want. As his crew scrambled to ready the Odyssey for a potential confrontation, Hayes couldn't shake the feeling that this was more than just a battle. They were being offered something, or perhaps forced into a position where they would have to make a choice. The unknown ships, with their impossible technology, were waiting for humanity to make its move. But what would happen if the wrong choice was made?